servant enduring, suffering servant enduring the pain of the cross. King Jesus, you are worthy, you are worthy. King Jesus, you are holy, you are holy.
You're listening to the Centrepoint Vineyard podcast. We're a church on Sydney's northern beaches with Jesus and his kingdom at the centre. We hope this message is an encouragement to you.
King Jesus, you are worthy, you are worthy.
Hello friends, what a beautiful morning it's been already. Thank you so much, Dan, for leading us this morning. And so as Johnny mentioned, we're beginning a new series this week, and as you might know, we're in the lead up to Easter, and as we're kind of preparing ourselves for Easter, we're tracking through the Gospel of Luke. And in particular, we're following Jesus' path towards Jerusalem. So that's kind of the title of the whole series, is this road to Jerusalem that Jesus is walking along. And as we ourselves walk on this road over the next few weeks, we're going to be making a few stops along the way and taking a closer look at some of the things that Jesus said and did on his journey. So just a bit of background. In the Bible, we have these four Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. And these Gospels basically give accounts of Jesus' life, all the different things that he said, did as he walked on the earth. And for Luke, writing out his particular Gospel account, he is a meticulous kind of person. So Luke was a doctor, and even at the beginning of Luke, he says, I want to give a detailed account of all the things that Jesus did. And so there might be a reason that his gospel has the highest word count of all the gospels. He has a lot to say, and he loves to add in these little details that really bring things to life for us. And the way that Luke chooses to structure his gospel from chapter 9 to 19, I mean, we put in the chapters later, so he didn't write up chapter 9, this happens. But for a huge portion of his gospel, he's covering this journey that Jesus takes to Jerusalem. So just for context, the journey that Jesus is on, this road to Jerusalem, it isn't like Jesus has plugged it into Google Maps. What's the quickest route? What's going to get me there from A to B as fast as possible? Like if you trace it on a map, he's kind of moving all over the region, but it's this important time of preparation, right? So Jesus is on this journey of traveling to his final week in Jerusalem, which is like the climax of the story. This is what everything is building to. This is where in this final week in Jerusalem, he's going to be betrayed by his friend. He's going to be put on trial in a kangaroo court scenario. He's going to be killed by a Roman execution method called crucifixion, buried in a tomb, and then raised to life 3 days later, what we call the resurrection. And so as followers of Jesus, this is what we are remembering and celebrating every Easter. So as Jesus is on this long journey in the lead up to what will be the first Easter, along the way, he stops in at a certain village where a woman invites him over for lunch. And that's what we're going to focus on today, is the story of Mary and Martha. So if you have a Bible with you or something on your phone, feel free to open up to Luke chapter 10, and we'll read from verse 38. So Luke chapter 10, verse 38. It'll also be up here so you can follow along. Just a bit of context, in Luke 9, verse 51, it says that as the time drew near for him to ascend to heaven, Jesus resolutely set out for Jerusalem. So he's on this journey, he's on this pathway to what's to come. And it says from chapter 10, verse 38, as Jesus and his disciples continued on their way to Jerusalem, they came to a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. Her sister, Mary, sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he taught. But Martha was distracted by the big dinner she was preparing. She came to Jesus and said, Lord, doesn't it seem unfair to you that my sister just sits here while I do all the work? Tell her to come and help me. But the Lord said to her, my dear Martha, you're worried and upset over all these details, There is only one thing worth being concerned about. Mary has discovered it, and it will not be taken away from her. This might be a familiar passage for some of us in the room, and we might know this story even if we've grown up in church, from childhood. But I'm hoping that today we can hear it in a fresh way and notice something different about what Jesus does here. So let's paint the picture. We've got two sisters, Mary and Martha, and they're kind of in different positions in this story. And I just want to start with a couple of really simple observations right off the top. So first observation, it's Martha who welcomes Jesus into her home. So in verse 38, we heard, as Jesus and his disciples continued on their way to Jerusalem, they came to a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed Jesus into her home. So it isn't Mary who extends the welcome to Jesus initially, it's Martha. Martha seems to have this gift of hospitality. Do you have anyone in your life that just has a gift of hospitality? Like there's always room for one more. They're always looking to invite, always looking to bring in. Like these people are like the glue of communities, right? I love these kinds of people. We love Martha. So she's the one, she invites Jesus in, and then she's putting in so much effort to prepare this big dinner for Jesus. If we think about the love languages, like Martha is an acts of service kind of person. Are there any budding chefs in the room, people that love to whip up a big dinner? I'm seeing a few knowing glances and nods of the head. I adore the feeling of having friends come over and putting on a big, ottolenghi feast or something like that with so many components. But I tell you, it is a lot of brain space having to manage 10 different processes at once, trying to remember which bits you're meant to be roasting or turning the oven off, turning the oven on, whatever's going on. It takes a lot of mind space, effort, capacity, prep, right? And I remember when Kirk and I were walking on the Camino path a few years ago, there was someone that said to us, attention to detail is an expression of love. And that really stuck with me, that this is a way that a lot of us show love to people, is with the attention to detail. It's in the little things. And Martha is doing that. She's trying to attend to all the details as a way to show her love and her welcome to Jesus. Second observation, sibling dynamics. Who in the room has a sibling or two, or four in my case? Okay, so you will understand a little bit of what's going on in this story, a bit of the subtext. So there's something about being around family, isn't there, where we have these lifelong patterns that have been set in stone from childhood, just layer upon layer of how we react to each other, what our roles in the family are, these scripts that we seem to just act over and over again, reinforcing our roles. And growing up, I was probably, I know this will come as a shock to some of you, but I was the most forgetful scatty of all my family members, of all my siblings. And I would leave the house to go to a cello rehearsal and forget my cello, or I would go to hockey training and forget my hockey stick. It was constant. And over time, you'll be happy to know I've gotten better. I've had to learn how to be a little less forgetful. And I would say, Kirk, no, not to cast aspersions, but I would say I'm actually the less forgetful of the two of us. So it's a story of growth in the end. But when I go back to my family's home, I tell you, I revert to being the forgetful one like that. Basically every time I go over, there's a text message in the family WhatsApp. Are these anyone's sunglasses? Is this someone's keys? Oh, yep. That would be me. And so just think about your family relationships for a minute. What are all those layers upon layers that have built up over time? What are the scripts that you keep reading from over and over in your family dynamics? So Mary and Martha, these two sisters, they've grown up together, right? So they have this complex, long-standing relational dynamic. And we're just kind of getting this little sliver of an insight into it in this tiny story that Luke tells. My guess, reading this story, is that this isn't the first time that Martha, our acts of service, glue of the community kind of person, has felt like she's stuck doing all of the work while Mary gets to, pour a drink, sit back and relax, chat away to the guests. Martha's in this scene, slaving over a hot stove, whatever she's cooking up. She's probably been simmering, just like whatever's in that pot. She's been simmering on this for a while, thinking, I guess Mary's having a nice time chatting to Jesus. Does she not see I'm doing absolutely everything to pull this big, impressive meal for our honoured guests together? And all the while she's thinking about how Mary is, skiving off, just sitting, listening to Jesus in the next room. And eventually, Martha cracks. Has anyone been there before? It builds, and that the steam has to escape somehow. And so here's what she says in verse 40. Lord, doesn't it seem unfair to you that my sister just sits here while I do all the work? Tell her to come and help me. Like, I love this detail. It just feels true to what siblings say, right? And I also find it interesting that in this, Martha doesn't go to Mary. I mean, these are two adults. She doesn't go to Mary and say, hey, Mary, would you mind just helping me set the table? Like, can you just do this? She goes to Jesus. And it's a little bit like that old script, once again, of like, Mum, it isn't fair. Like, they get to do that. I don't get to do that. Can you tell I've had practice saying that? And you know what? Honestly, I side with Martha here. Like, if I were in that room, I would be 100% saying, yeah, Mary, do you mind? Like, could we maybe just get a start on the washing up? Like, pull your weight a little bit. And Martha goes to Jesus as this source of authority to say, I've been having this argument all my life. It's time for you to sort this out for us. And Jesus does not give Martha what she's hoping for, unfortunately for Martha, or fortunately for Martha. So in verse 41, the next verse, the Lord said to her, my dear Martha, you are worried and upset over all these details. I love how Jesus addresses Martha here, my dear Martha. In the original text, it's actually Martha, Martha. Like, it carries so much in that. He really sees Martha. He loves Martha, and he sees all the effort she's going to try and express her care and her love. And he tells her, you are worried and upset over all these details. Now, when we read that, sometimes it's, I think sometimes we see that as a bit of a rebuke or a correction of Martha. Like, Jesus is like, Martha, you're doing the wrong thing. You're upset over the things you shouldn't be worrying about. And we hear it in that tone, like it's a bit of a strong correction from Jesus. But I wonder if we're kind of missing the heart of what Jesus is saying. Like, he's saying, oh, Martha, like, my dear Martha, I see all the effort you're putting in. Like, I see the 10-course feast you're trying to pull off. I don't actually need a fancy dinner from you. Like, that's not what I'm here for. I'm not looking to be impressed. I don't want to see you all stressed and upset. What I really want is just to spend this opportunity of time that we have together, sitting with you, talking with you. Jesus goes on, there is only one thing, Martha, worth being concerned about. Mary has discovered it, and it will not be taken away from her. So, Martha, you are concerned about all these things, but there's only one thing worth being concerned about. Wouldn't you love for Jesus to then say, this is the one thing that you should be concerned about? But no, Jesus loves to leave things kind of unread for us to delve into. Like, if you think about how many parables he told where the disciples went away and be like, did you know what he meant? No, I didn't know what he meant. Oh, like, he loves to make us think. He loves to make us sit with something and think, oh, what did Jesus really mean by that? And so here he's saying, like, Martha, there's one really important thing. Mary knows it, but I'm not going to really tell you what it is. You just have to work it out for yourself. And so I wonder what Martha's thinking. Like, we're not actually told in the story how she reacts, what she says. Does she kind of take the food off the stove, sit down on a cushion with Mary and Jesus, forget about all the meal prep? Maybe she feels slightly miffed that Jesus hasn't backed her up in this lifelong sibling battle. Or does she just go and finish the dinner anyway and kind of question what Jesus has said? Now, I don't know if you're like me, but perhaps you've felt that experience in life of running on empty, like running on fumes and trying to keep all the plates spinning, trying to do so many things. And deep down, you would just love for someone to come along and say, hey, don't worry about all that. Just come, I'm going to make you a cup of tea. Let's sit and let's chat. Like, in just the deep exhale of being able to relax when you're all stressed with everything on your plate. And that's what Jesus is inviting Martha into in this moment. I find it so interesting that Martha is putting on herself all this pressure to perform, but notice that it isn't Jesus that's putting the pressure on her. Jesus hasn't requested a fancy meal. And it's a real life demonstration of what Jesus teaches in Matthew 11. This is from verse 28 in the Message, which is like Eugene Peterson's interpretation. So it says, "Are you tired, worn out, burnt out on religion? Come to me, get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me, work with me, watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly." And I just wonder, maybe like Martha, are there things that we are busying ourselves with, that we feel obligated to, that we should be doing A, B, and C, but actually Jesus isn't asking or expecting us to do those things? Just a kind of a thought to ponder this week. And if you'll allow me, I just wanted to take a quick diversion this morning, bit of a scenic route for a couple of minutes, just to point out something else in this story that I find quite interesting. So this phrase, Mary sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he taught. When I read that off the page, I'm just thinking, well, this is just a physical description of how the room's set up, who's sitting where, like Jesus is maybe on a higher stool and Mary's like on a cushion at his feet. Like we think of it in that literal way of how they're sitting. But actually what we miss is this phrase, at the Lord's feet, is an idiom. And it's an idiom to describe the way that a disciple is taught by a rabbi. So if in the first century you were a devout Jewish boy, you would have grown up learning the Torah. Just like Jesus did. That's what Jesus was doing as a boy. And if you were one of the best and brightest, what you really hoped for was that there would come a day when a rabbi would come to you and say, "Come follow me, come and be my disciple and let me teach you." And just as an aside to this aside, when Jesus approached those scruffy fishermen on the beach and said, "Come follow me," that's what he was doing as a rabbi, calling disciples. And that was unseen, before that you would call some uneducated scruffy blokes on a beach to be your disciples. So if you were one of those devout Jewish men and someone asked you, "Oh, who is your rabbi? Which rabbi are you a student of?" you might reply by saying, "I sit at the feet of Rabbi insert name." So for example, in Acts 22 verse 3, when Paul is stating his credentials to the crowd at the temple, he says, "I was reared in this city, having been trained in the law of the fathers with exacting precision at the feet of Gamaliel," who was a highly respected rabbi in the day. So Mary is taking the place of a disciple at the feet of Rabbi Jesus. And in the first century, this was not a position traditionally allowed for women to be in. But Jesus welcomes Mary into that position. And when Martha complains to her sister that she's left all alone to serve, maybe there's also a sense in which Martha is annoyed and offended that Mary is taking a position that in the gender expectations of the day wouldn't have been for her to sit in. She's not serving in the kitchen, instead she's acting like she's a disciple of this rabbi. And in Jesus' response to Martha, he is affirming Mary's position as disciple, number one, but also he's inviting Martha to take the same position as his disciple, as someone to learn from this great teacher. And we heard in the previous weeks at church about Jesus' upside down kingdom. And this is another example of that in practice. Okay, so that's the end of my digression. I just thought that was quite an interesting little detail. So, zooming out, thinking about this road to Jerusalem, this journey to Easter, what does this story of these two sisters have to do with this particular season in the church calendar, which we call Lent? So Lent is not actually a word that you'll find anywhere in the Bible, but it's something that's developed through the history of the church. And it's a way of marking out this time in the lead up to the most significant moment in our church calendar. It's a different kind of stretch of time. There's a particular nature to this time in the lead up to Easter, this walk that we're on. You know, time itself is a gift from God. Like in Genesis, it's one of the first things God does in creation. He marks out different times. There's night, there's day. And we know from experience that different stretches of time have different characters. So winter is different from spring. Monday has a very different character to Sunday. unfortunately. And this shapes our activities, our feelings, our behaviours, how we use that particular stretch of time. So I know I'm stating the obvious here, like we all know there are different kinds of time, but I just think it's important to think, how are we orienting ourselves in this particular time, this time of Lent? Like, what is the nature of it? You know, in Ecclesiastes, I had a picture I forgot about. There we go, walking on the road to Jerusalem. So for everything there is a season, a time for every activity under heaven. What is this season of Lent for? What is the activity that we engage with because it is Lent and we know that Easter is coming? As followers of Jesus, this particular time is part of a big story, right? Like that we're invited into this story of what God is doing in the earth, in all creation. And if we think about the first 3 words of the Bible, in the beginning, these are the words that begin a grand story, right? A big, grand, epic tale. And the Bible in its essence is this big story that tells the story of the world that we're sitting in right now. And it's this story of God partnering with people just like you and me all through time to make all things new, to take what's broken, what's out of order, and to make it beautiful again. And as we're living in this story, in this journey on the way to Easter, this is the time where Jesus took what was chaotic, full of disorder and darkness, and began to generate something new that's beautiful and beneficial. He did it through himself. He defeated sin and death, raising us up with him into new life. And this is the story that we've been invited into. So how do we live in that story? How does this journey to Easter shape our behaviours, our feelings, our activities about this particular stretch of time that we're in right now? Well, over the centuries, followers of Jesus have found that there are certain practices that really help them to orient themselves during Lent as they walk towards Easter. So fasting is a very common practice, giving up something we delight in or rely on, a way to reorient ourselves. So, and the idea is that like that pang of hunger or that longing for whatever that creature comfort is, it's like a little wake-up call in our day. It's removing a bit of the noise and clutter, and it's saying, psst, like remember where you are, remember what this time is about. And without that thing that we usually reach for, we have to kind of confront our own brokenness, our own neediness, our own wounds. And it's a reminder to pray like, Lord, we need you. I uncovered this reflection by Ryan Lagori about what Lent means to him. And he says, we need to face the fact that modern culture, religious and non-religious, values productivity, speed and excess more than it values contemplation, simplicity or quietude. As much as I try to resist these cultural pressures on my own, I know that without a clear program to follow, I will just get swept along. The values of speed, excess and productivity may be good for capitalism, but they're bad for spirituality. They make me greedy, self-centered, impatient and anxious. Lent undercuts this. It says, slow down. And it says it in big, bold, screaming letters, slow down. Lent reminds me that no amount of productivity can stave off death, nor can I race my way around my sins like a car blowing through swiftly changing traffic light. Lent says walk in a culture that screams run. Slow down, pause, remember the basics. And you know, in our culture, in our wider culture, like March, this time of year is like everyone's back at work, school, uni, whatever's going on. It's a time of like productivity, push, get results, like do what you're meant to be doing every day with gusto. But actually, this is a time for us as followers of Jesus to slow down, to notice, to reorient ourselves that there's a much bigger story that we're living in. So let's return to our friends, Mary and Martha. As we heard in Ecclesiastes, there's a time for every activity under the sun. There is a time to put on a lavish meal and bless people. There's a time to work hard at what you've been given to do. There's a time to manage the practical needs of the people that you care for. But there's also a time to sit at the feet of Jesus and do nothing more and nothing less than listen to him, our teacher. You know, when Jesus is in the room, that's the only thing to be concerned about. And it's like Martha focus on what this moment is. You have Jesus sitting in your living room. You've got your back turned, you're distracted. Turn around and see what the most important thing here is. And Jesus, in his kindness, gave Martha this opportunity to reorient herself, to turn away from the distractions and to focus on Jesus. And in church language, that's kind of the word we use for repentance, which can sound like a scary word, but really what it is, it's realizing and acknowledging that we've been heading down the wrong path, that we've been distracted by things that don't matter, and reorient ourselves in a new direction. And so I just invite us to think this morning, is there an area where Jesus, in his kindness, is giving you an opportunity to reorient yourself? Where he's saying to you the words he says to Martha, you're distracted by all these things. There's only one thing that's important. And maybe there is something that you know that you reach for to kind of self-soothe in moments of stress. And it doesn't have to be food. For me, it's crosswords. I just love doing a crossword if things are getting a bit stressful. And it's something that maybe we could put down in this lead up to Easter, on this journey that we're on to Jerusalem. And maybe there's something that we want to pick up. Spending a few minutes praying each day, or listening to a Bible project video, putting on some worship music when we're walking. These quiet activities that maybe don't seem like much, but they're just the things that reorient ourselves, that turn us around from the distraction to focus on what matters. And whether you choose to fast, to pray, to lay something down, to pick something up this Lent, let us all hear Jesus' words to us today. He says, "My dear friend, you are worried and upset over all these details. There is only one thing worth being concerned about, and when you have discovered it, it will not be taken away from you." Amen. So I just invite us this morning, let's stand if you're able, and just spend a few moments reorienting ourselves.
Thanks so much for listening. To find out more, you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, or our website, centerpointvineyard.org. Music is King Jesus by Sam Glover.
Pain of the cross, King Jesus, you are worthy, you are worthy. King Jesus, you are holy, you are holy. Son, how we love thee, how we love thee. King Jesus,